Figured out how to get boys to watch movies, the formula is trickier for getting boys to read, especially among those who've already expressed frustration and boredom with books. Tonight, author Jason Reynolds, whose newest young adult novel is called Long Way Down, shares his opinion on how poetry can dazzle reluctant readers.
If you were to tell me that you were afraid of dogs, I wouldn't then return to you with a pack of pit bulls. I wouldn't invite you out to a quiet evening over dinner in Cujo. However, what I might do is casually walk with you by one of those doggy daycares, the ones with the pups small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, yippy little fur balls that get so excited their tails wag the entire back halves of their bodies, the dogs that grin and want nothing more than to lap your skin with fervent affection. That's how I would help break down the distrust of dogs. Just makes sense. So then why, when it comes to young people who don't like reading, who feel intimidated by literature, do we answer that cry with an onslaught of the very thing they fear? Why do we show up with a pack of pit bulls in the form of pages and expect them to stop running away? Perhaps they haven't found the right style of book, because sometimes it isn't about subject matter or voice or point of view. Sometimes it's about the most obvious thing, the words on the page. For some kids, those words, the amount of words, is equivalent to a starving dog. So why not start with the less threatening palm-sized pup in the window? In this case, poetry. Poetry has the ability to create entire moments with just a few choice words. The spacing and line breaks create rhythm, a helpful musicality, a natural flow. The separate stanzas aid in perpetuating a kind of incremental reading, one small chunk at a time. And the white space, for an intimidated reader, adds breathability to a seemingly suffocating task. I wrote this to explore the in-depth, though momentary, inner monologue of a young person dealing with a complex emotion, one we all can relate to in just 50 words. I felt like crying, which felt like another person trapped behind my face, tiny fists punching the backs of my eyes, feet kicking my throat at the spot where the swallow starts. Stay put, I whispered to him. Stay strong, I whispered to me, because crying is against the rules. With the incredible selection of poetry and novels in verse from past to present, this is an opportune time to use them to chip away at bibliophobia. Less words on the page, more white space without necessarily sacrificing the narrative elements. And once young people experience turning those pages, once the rush of comprehension and completion laps at their psyches for the first time, perhaps they will know they need not fear a thing created to love them and for them to love.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Tammy.
Good morning, Sheikah. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and thank you guys for joining us this morning. We're so excited that everybody's on with this. I hope that you were on with Principal Hurt this morning. If you weren't, please make sure you go back and listen. He was talking about the importance of having a supportive spouse, and he did an outstanding, incredibly amazing job with that, because we both know how important it is to have somebody who has your back and supports the work that you do.
Definitely. And the thing that you saw, the YouTube video that we posted for the introduction, and I'm trying to go through the comments at the same time that I'm talking. I think I'm done. Was Jason Reynolds. And if you're not familiar with him, he is he's a writer and an author. He uses like a unique form of poetry and tries to capture the attention of young adult readers in a special way. So his interview, good morning, Principal Kafele, and good morning, everyone that's joining us. His interview, this was a part of one that was shown later. The one that we really wanted to show was his interview with Trevor Noah, who is a comedian and also had written a book. And in their interview, they talked about how Jason Reynolds is such a prolific writer and author for children, but he never even read his first novel cover to cover until he was 17. And that was because he said that, you know, the literature and the things that he was presented with in school, he didn't feel like he saw himself in it. It didn't relate to him. They also talked about how a lot of African American male readers talk, you know, about how they don't like to read, or it's not cool to read, or if they do read, they don't want people to know that they read. So what he does with his books is try to make them appealing to where he feels like if the packaging is right, then it doesn't make them feel like they have to be ashamed of their reading or what they're reading. So he does different things like, you know, put things on the books that may be masculine or whatever. But in his interview, and I'm going to post it later in the comments with Trevor Noah, he mentioned how he felt like he is basically a servant to students. And when we had a professional development this week with teachers, that was one of the things that we talked about. A lot of the teachers have expressed some frustration, and leaders even, with some of the engagement levels in schools with children. And one of the questions that we posed was, if we were brave enough to approach education from the standpoint, and this is as leaders, teachers, and even parents, from the standpoint that we are soliciting feedback from our students, would that up their engagement levels? Because when you think about children, and then when you think about how we conduct our feedback process, most of the time, the feedback that's coming to teachers is by way of observations from adults. But if we were really wanting to engage the students and get their thoughts, we would be really getting that information from them. And this is beyond what we get from school report card surveys, because by the time those surveys come out, you know, the year is over with. So when we are conducting professional development, we always give feedback survey, or we get a survey to get that feedback on, was this beneficial? Was it helpful? What if we approached teaching and leading that way with students, where their voices were heard? And so that's his approach, basically seeing himself as a servant to young people. So that was our question this morning. Do we, as leaders, as teachers, as parents, are we approaching this, what we're doing with our children in schools, as a way to being servants to young people? Or are we, you know, like you hear a lot of people say sometimes, well, I've got mine, they've got to get theirs, that feel like they're just honored to be in our presence. And if we are servants to the students, if we do welcome their feedback, if we are hearing their voices, what does that look like? And one of the other things he talked about, Jason Reynolds, in that interview, ways that we can make the curriculum relevant, and being that servant teacher. When you think about things like the classics, because he talked about how, you know, Shakespeare, of course, is a part of the curriculum, is considered the classics. But for him, it wasn't anything that he was interested in at the time. But when you pair that with something from Queen Latifah or Maya Angelou, and you look at it on a continuum to say that none of this is new, that, you know, you show the differences, you do the comparisons, but you allow students to be able to see themselves in the curriculum, then you have a different level of engagement. You have still taught them what is considered to be the classics, but you also make them a part of it. So one of the teachers that was a part of our training that we conducted this past week, she had shown this video or this interview of Jason Reynolds and Trevor Noah talking about how young Black males really don't like to read. And it was interesting to see their responses to it, because they did agree, that it wasn't something that was considered to be cool amongst friends or in the culture, in the environment that they were in. But when he did show the covers of the book, and they were going to read his book in that class, this particular book is called Long Way Down. That book was something that they were interested in reading. So it was just a really good interview and a good way of showing how we can go outside of the box to try to reach our young people. We don't have to continuously do things the way that we've always done them to check a box to say, I've taught my standard, and then the leader comes in and say, oh, I'm looking at the learning target, it's posted, they're on track with the learning target. Because when I come in to look at the children and what they're doing, and the teacher, I'm looking to see, does anybody care? Yeah, we're on point, we have the target, but has this been made relatable to the children? Because if they're not engaged, if it's not relatable, if they don't care, it doesn't matter. What we're doing is nothing, essentially. So I was really impressed with the teachers that took that from the training. When I asked that question, are we really brave enough to get that feedback from students with our lessons? And one person said, you really got to have a tough skin to be able to ask children that type of question, because if you've spent hours on a lesson and then their feedback is something that's going to rip you apart, or they're going to, they're saying it's not engaging, or it's boring, or they didn't like it, that's going to hurt the teacher's feelings. And I said, so, are we really worried about, we care about teachers' feelings, but I mean, really, as adults, if you spent that much time on something that nobody liked, I would feel better about, well, wow, I need to move in a different direction. What do you think about that, Tammy?
I enjoyed watching the video, and I think the thing that I really took from it that spoke most to me, and it still resonates, because I am an avid reader. I like to read, and I like to read just about anything. So Shakespeare is something that I enjoy. But my mom is an avid reader, so you kind of just get that. But when he was talking about how being in school, and the reason he hadn't read a novel cover to cover was not because he couldn't, but because there was nothing that appealed to him. And I started thinking back to that during that time, because like those are the times that we were in high school, and you think back and you start thinking like his point is well taken. You can't put those same kinds of books in the hands of kids who don't just enjoy reading because it's a good story anymore, because some of those kids can't even relate to the issues that were issues at that time. Like they didn't live through, or they didn't live close enough to the time when some of those things were happening that they can relate to them. So providing them with high interest and readable text will pull them into the love of reading. And that was what he was talking about. That's what we want to get. We want to spark this passion for reading in our boys especially. But I saw a comment that Principal Kafele made, and that culturally relevant material has to be available so that things that are of interest to students, boys especially, because that's the population that we were hearing about in that particular video, we have to put things there that are of interest to them, whether it interests us or not. And I was listening to you about, the conversation with your teachers during the training, and I think it's a great idea to get feedback from kids. And I don't mean just in the classroom. Like, you need to listen to what your children are saying, because I think that levels you up. You can level up by making those changes that need to be made, whether it's in the middle of the lesson or not. So I think that we have to help teachers to understand, just like I'm in a staff meeting, I know how to read the body language of the people that are in the meeting. Like when it has gotten to be too much, all right, we might need to press pause and come back to this at a different time. We might need just a think break, or we might need a brain break to turn and talk to somebody. But we have to have teachers who are paying attention to what's happening in their classrooms, because you don't necessarily have to have an evaluation or a ticket that says that I didn't enjoy your lesson. You can see whether they are engaged in what you're doing, whether they appreciate the learning that you're providing for them. And you have to be willing to make those kinds of changes on the spot. So I think, like you said, that when people see the interview with Trevor, I think they will really be able to take something away from that, because what we need to make sure we're doing is being for real, because that's the other part that I think will help us to gain credibility with our students. Is we have to be for real about what it is we're putting out there in front of them, and we have to do our homework and do some research so that we know what these items are that are going to capture their attention.
Exactly. And I'm glad you made that statement about reading the body language, because you can see whether or not they're engaged, but whether or not you're a servant leader or servant to your students or not will determine whether or not you care to do anything about it. Because some people will say, well, I've taught the standard and this is what is stated, this is what the curriculum is, and I've done what I'm supposed to do, and now it's up to them. But it's up to us.
Yes, and I think it depends on how personally you take that, because and we were talking before when we were getting ready, and I was saying, who could think that kids are lucky to be in your presence? Come on. This is what we're here to do. And I think you're right. I think there is a definite grade span mentality difference, because people in my space are down the floor trying to get them to do whatever needs to be done. I mean, whatever it takes is how we are trying to reach kids. So I guess some of that comes with when they've learned how to do school, and you know how you're supposed to be behaving at school, and you know that you come to school to learn. Maybe that is what people think, that okay, I already got everything I'm supposed to have. But I can't have that attitude, not my kids or my teachers. Yeah, I have what I'm supposed to have so I can help you to get what you need.
Right. And sometimes when people become content specialists, they get so zoned in on that content, that sometimes is the focus, but the children should always be the focus. Yes. And even as a leader, when I would get feedback on things that I was going to buy, some people miss the children. They'll ask the teachers what they think. They'll send out surveys sometimes to parents. I used to go ask the children, what do y'all think about this? What y'all like about it? What don't you like about it? And I would watch them on the programs, because a lot of them, they were bored. You could see that they were bored with them. I'm not going to spend any more money on this. And obviously the children are sick of this. So we've got to get something else. So, you can see that, but you have to care enough to go find out. You have to care enough to hear them, and you have to care enough to do something about it. So we are at our time. We hope that we definitely enjoyed Principal Hurt this morning, and that is definitely a needed topic about that spouse support. And one of the Facebook groups that we have on our page, Fit Mind, Fit Bodies, where we're addressing the mind, body, and spirit, we created that group because as leaders, a lot of times you hear from your staff about things that are going on in their lives. And sometimes, like Principal Hurt said, those things come to school with people. And so it impacts their performance. It impacts the children in the classroom. It impacts you as the leader, because you're getting everybody's stuff. So you have to be able to deal with that. So we created that space because what I realized as a leader is a lot of people wasn't happy with their lives. So, you know, if you're not happy with your life, you know, how is that going to transcend over to you trying to help somebody else figure theirs out? So
And it does. People will take that out on whatever situation or context you find yourself in. So I think we applaud you, Principal Hurt, for having the discourse this morning, because it is absolutely imperative that you have a spouse who you are supported by and who you trust. I thought it was so interesting, and I was telling Sheikah, it was just, I loved hearing what you were sharing. Keith is, my situation was a little bit different. I got married when I was 18 years old.
Husband,
I'm sorry, Keith is my husband, if you didn't know that. But Taylor and I got married when we were 18 years old. So he's literally supported me most of my life. So it is good to have that support. And I think when we are able to hear from leaders like Principal Hurt, who live that dream of being in the space where Erica was able to support him through all of the various things that have gone on, I loved hearing it, and we applaud you for having the conversation.
Definitely. And join Fit Minds and Fit Bodies. That's our Facebook group that really covers your self-care, because, you know, you got to be happy with yourself before you can be happy with anybody else. So it really addresses that mind, body, spirit aspect, and has lots of different. We are partnered with some other people that talk about relationships. We'll probably share Principal Hurt's information about relationships in there too. But also join us next Tuesday. We're going to be joined on the collaborative at 7 p.m. with Miss Arcella Austri. She is an MTSS interventionist, so we're happy to hear from her and how she's keeping it real this school year at her school. And also, we have another group where we provide resources for teachers and leaders. So a lot of our different things, like our schedules and how we format things, where we're just trying to provide you with that support and be that partner to you, is in that group. So thank you all for joining us. We hope that you have a great rest of your Saturday. Join us next on Principal Kafele's page. He is going to be having a great conversation this morning as well that we're excited to hear. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next Saturday and Tuesday.
Have a great rest of your day, and prayers for all of the victims of the hurricane.
Definitely. And we are safe here in our area in South Carolina. So yes, prayers for everyone. Thank you all.